I'm Anynewprovince, and this week we're trying to find out if Stronghold Confessor is possibly Pauper playable. This version of Mono Black Aggro featuring Stronghold Confessor and Divest comes from He Who Is in the Water. One of the things we like to do in the Discord that I have linked in the description down below is talk about our success with our brews and what we're trying to do with new cards as they're released. He Who Was in the Water mentioned that they were having some success with this deck featuring new cards from Dominaria, so obviously I had to take it out for a spin for this series. Stronghold Confessor fits into the Mono Black Aggro build because it has some built-in evasion that really helps the deck punch through a stalled board state. For 1 black mana, you get a 1/1 with Menace, which is great because it can attack around your opponent's single Augur of Bolas. What makes Stronghold Confessor even better is that it has Kicker 3, which means you may pay an additional 3 generic mana as you cast this spell. If you do, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters, making it a veritable attacker that your opponent can't just throw a chump blocker in the way of. Our other evasive threat is a mainstay in most Mono Black Aggro lists. It's Dauthi Slayer. It's a 2/2 for 2 black that has Shadow, which means it can block or be blocked by only creatures with Shadow. It attacks each combat if able, but that's okay because it's probably going to slip through. One really interesting thing about Dauthi Slayer that may get overlooked is that it can block a creature that's had Shadow Rift cast on it. This is a way that Tireless Tribe decks and sometimes even Izzet Blitz decks try to sneak through those last points of damage. Luckily, we can put Dauthi Slayer in the way. Next, I'm going to talk about the explosive start that can pull you into playing a Mono Black Aggro list. Your red, green, and green aggro lists use Burning Tree Emissary, but we use Dark Ritual. You can use Dark Ritual at instant speed to pay 1 black mana and get 3 black mana back. There's a lot of complicated ways to use this spell in decks like Storm, but we're just going to use it to spew out a bunch of 1-drops. Speaking of 1-drops, let's go over those next. First, we have Karna Phage, which costs 1 black for a 2/2, and at the beginning of your upkeep, tap Karna Phage unless you pay 1 life. You could argue that paying this 1 life is too big a cost to have a 2/2 attacker on turn 1. However, this deck aims to end the game so quickly that having a couple of life lost here and there shouldn't matter at all. Next, we have Night Market Lookout, which costs 1 black for a 1/1, and whenever it becomes tapped, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This creates a net 3-point life swing every time Night Market Lookout attacks. It's most useful in this deck because it effectively attacks as a 2-power creature. However, a little bit of incidental life gain goes a long way. Next, we have Pulse Tracker, which is effectively a strictly worse Night Market Lookout, but it gets the job done by getting in for 2 points of damage whenever it attacks. Pulse Tracker costs 1 black for a 1/1, and whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. Our last 2-powered attacker for 1 black mana is Vampire Lacerator. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life unless an opponent has 10 life or less, so long as Vampire Lacerator is on the battlefield, but that isn't a big issue. With our incidental life gain with Night Market Lookout and closing out the game quickly, this is just another great creature to add to this deck. I have our other creatures grouped separately because they help this deck survive in a bit of a longer, grindier game. First, we have Organ Grinder, which costs 2 and a black, and you can tap it, exile 3 cards from your graveyard, and cause target player to lose 3 life. For most of the early and mid game, we're going to be swinging in with our creatures at a loss and trying to reduce our opponent's life total by as much as possible. If they do manage to stabilize or draw into some of their fogs, Organ Grinder is going to be able to tick down those last few troublesome life points. We also have Carrion Feeder, which is 1 black for a 1/1 that can't block, but you can also sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. When our opponent's board starts outclassing our 1/1s and our 2/2s, we can sacrifice them to Carrion Feeder and make it big enough to punch through. It also fills our graveyard for Organ Grinder when that becomes relevant. This deck is always trying to go straight under its opponents and win before their board becomes relevant. However, some creatures need to be answered, so we're running just a little bit of interaction. It's a little bit more difficult to get a 2-for-1 out of Geth's Verdict than Chainer's Edict. However, it being instant speed and causing your opponent to lose a life is exactly what we want to be doing with our interaction. First, we have Geth's Verdict, which costs 2 black for an instant that causes target player to sacrifice a creature and lose a life. Our last non-land card is Divest, another new inclusion from Dominaria. Divest costs 1 black for a sorcery that causes target player to reveal their hand. You choose an artifact or creature card from it, that player discards that card. Divest is just a great proactive tool for aggressive decks. We can strip Prophetic Prisms, Augur, Bolosses, and Spellstutter sprites from our opponent's hand to prevent them from 2-for-1ing us before we can kill them. Alright, let's have a look at this mana base. It's no surprise that it's just 17 untapped basic swamps. That isn't very many, but Dark Ritual can produce mana too. We just want an untapped swamp on turn 1, Dark Ritual, cast 3 1-drops, and get the game over with. And there you have it, Mono Black Aggro by He Who Is in the Water, featuring Stronghold Confessor and Divest. We're going to take this deck live into a league this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time at twitch.tv/Anynewprovince. We're there every Tuesday night playing Possibly Pauper Playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday night.